Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stefan Spencer, and today I'm so excited to have Ross Tavendale with us. Ross originally cut his teeth at a big box agency working with some of the biggest sites in the world, from the Royal Bank of Scotland to Tripadvisor. Now the managing director at Type A Media, Ross spends his time researching new SEO practices and business processes to help drive operational efficiency and gain results faster for his clients. He's a regular on the SEO circuit, having spoken at Brighton SEO and Ungagged, as well as countless meetups and business events. He's also a keen content creator, hosting SEMrush webinars, providing expert comment on industry blogs, as well as hosting a weekly show called The Canonical Chronicle. Ross, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yes, well, we met several years ago at an SEMrush Summer Jam event. That was a lot of fun, and we got to chat personally and kind of bond around the topic, a shared passion that we have, biohacking. And so I'm curious, how have you kind of evolved since that initial conversation in terms of your biohacking and the various health regimens that you go through?
Yeah, I don't know if I've evolved or devolved, if I'm perfectly honest with you, but I remember speaking to you at that event and just downloading information from you. And I think at one point I got out my phone and asked you to slow down so I could take notes from you. So I think, what did you said something absolutely crazy to me, like you've like never been sick in like such a long time. We were talking about like energy management, where all that comes from, hacking your sleep, all sorts of stuff. And I was coming in, full of bravado. I think probably on my third cup of coffee of the day, mixed with, if it was in Prague, it probably would have been steins of beer, which, spoiler alert, not great if you're biohacking and trying to optimize your body. The biggest thing for me is I picked up Greg McKeown, I think that's his name, his book, Essentialism. And one of the things that kind of stuck out to me was the way in which you manage your time, in particular, what you think as essential in your daily schedule. Sleep being an interesting thing from my point of view, because I was always big in something called the 5 a.m. club, where we had a WhatsApp group of people who would take pictures of their watches at 5 a.m. and start us off for the day. You crash and burn out of that pretty quickly if you don't go to bed at the right time. So optimizing sleep being a big one. So taking out all electronics from the room, getting the humidity point right, getting it cold, changing mattresses.
Yeah.
You told me about something which actually grounds electricity. I've not quite went there yet, but the sleep thing has been a big one. You're doing something. What are you doing for sleep? I know you've got a 1-year-old, so I imagine that's quite the commodity, a bit of sleep.
The hack that I'm doing that makes the biggest difference is sleeping in another room. My wife and the baby sleep and like he's basically kicked me out of the bed, and which is okay because I need to work late to be able to deal with my clients in the U.S. because of the big time difference here in Tel Aviv. So yeah, it works out. But some of the big sleep hacks that I use, I have here. I'll go grab it. I actually have 2 of these. They're True Dark glasses. One is for the daytime, like afternoons. This is called the True Dark Daywalker. I look like a real nerd there with those on. And then these make me look like RoboCop. These are the True Dark Twilights.
Oh, wow. It's a bit X-Men. If you take them off, our laser's going to come out.
Yeah, it's not a great look to show up on Zoom calls with prospects wearing those. So I end up getting a lot more blue light exposure than I would like because I do have calls with prospects in the late hours. But whenever possible, I'll wear those. And I have this device. Let me grab this. This is the Happy, HAPBEE. And what it does, it broadcasts out a signal. It's ultra low EMF, very minimal exposure to EMF radiation. But what it does is it emulates a signal of either having kind of like a sleepy time tea, so there's a sleepy mode. There's alert mode, which emulates having a cup of coffee without the jittery side effects. I don't drink coffee, so that's pretty cool that I can emulate that effect just with frequencies. And
We should talk about stimulants at some point as well. I've got a little bit of a note on coffee, but sorry, carry on.
okay, yeah, there's 6 signals. There's relaxed and focused and calm and happy, like HAPPE. Not to be confused with the brand HAPB. It's kind of fun. Yeah, so those are the 6 signals, and it's pretty darn cool. So you can wear it, or you could even put it under your pillow and sleep with it in sleepy mode or relaxed mode. If you just try these different signals out and you see which ones resonate the most with you. So those are a couple of sleep biohacks that come to mind immediately because I have the kit right here. Something that you might want to try is to, here's something else that I forgot. I just got these in the mail. You might wonder what the heck is that.
Yeah, for those that are just listening to audio, he's just pulled up a big bag of drugs. No, what is it?
These are
a half ounce of weed for those who can't see the video.
These are tape that you put over your mouth, and you might think, what in the heck would you put tape on your mouth for? It's not super strong or sticky, so it's not gonna be a problem if you can't breathe from your nose because you're congested or something. You're not gonna die. But what it does is it stops you from snoring, and it kind of forces you, encourages you. It's not really forcing, but it definitely makes a big difference in terms of stopping the mouth breathing at night while you're sleeping, and then you're breathing through your nose. And that will improve your sleep quality. It'll improve your longevity. Super cool stuff. And also put your bed at an angle. Put something that's like a couple of blocks underneath the head portion of your bed, so you're sleeping at, let's say, an angle. I don't know what the number of that angle would be, but if it's 6 inches high up at the top of the bed, and then just regular at the foot of the bed, that will
so
also
not quite Wallace and Gromit 75 degrees, maybe something like 15 degrees off the ground. So it's a slight, you wouldn't fall out essentially, but
correct.
You would. Is it a blood flow thing? Is that why you do that?
Well, it reduces again the likelihood that you're going to snore. Snoring is kind of like the canary in the coal mine, just like having erectile dysfunction. I never thought we would talk about this on that episode, but having that is a canary in the coal mine for heart disease, because that's the first thing to go if you're starting to get blockages.
That's fascinating. Well, one of the reasons why I kind of took all this stuff a lot more seriously is because when you're first starting out and building these agencies, bootstrapped with no cash, there's one way that you can really grow it, and that's just by working all the time. And that's fine at the start, but then your body, I can't remember who wrote Your Body Keeps Score, but it really does. And then you start seeing all these like latent symptoms further down the line, whether it be things like erectile dysfunction, passing blood, things of that nature, which are pretty serious physiological signs that something's wrong. And this is the reason why I started taking this much more seriously, going to the doctor and they say, oh, it's stress related. I'm like, come on, I can't do anything with that. Stress related. Life is stress. Like, I need something. I need.
Well,
like
there's good stress and there's bad stress. So we want more good stress and less of the bad stress. No stress is not very entertaining. That's a pretty boring life. I wouldn't want that. So I just want more good stress and less of the bad stress. Like, how stressed are you, would you say? Like on a scale of 1 to 10?
Now I'm like a two, sometimes going to a four. But a couple of years ago, I was pretty much sitting at I would call it chronic. It was sitting at like a seven. Well, when I ask people to give me scores from 0 to 10, I use a Ray Dalio thing and say you're not allowed to say seven because that's a cop out number because it's just the right level of safe. So I would say I would be an eight rising to 10. But
Wow.
I always thought that was just part of the process. So sitting as I'm sitting with you now, and my heart would be pounding in my chest. I had no idea why. I'm like, oh, I must have had too much coffee, but I only had like 2 cups that day. So I then start to really listen to my body and understand myself. Um, and taking it from there has really helped get to a good place. You can't make good decisions when you're in fight or flight all the time,
Yeah.
and you can't make good decisions when you're angry. Tiny little problems seem like absolute mega challenges. So it's very important to understand that. So a bit of self-diagnosis. If you're starting to find things that were usually easy hard, that may be a stress response that you need to have a look at, and something is wrong somewhere. So think of it as a stream. You've got upstream and downstream problems. I remember going actually as a man in his late 20s, a couple of years back, having hip pain. I'm like, hip pain is for 80-year-olds. Like this is not me. And going to chiropractors and physiotherapists and things like that. And like, oh yeah, it's the problem is your pec. I'm like, what? No, it's the hip. Like, yeah, right. But it's upstream and downstream problems. And when they start working on it, this release happens. So I find that really fascinating. And that's something that's actually really helped a lot, is taking care of the physical to take care of the mental. I didn't realize how much of a big deal that was
Mm.
until I put on maybe about, I don't know what it is in pounds for any Americans listening, 10 kilos. That's like 20 pounds, maybe.
Yeah. 22 pounds.
Yeah, so too many pounds is you shouldn't be putting on that amount of weight over quite a short period of time. I'm relatively tall and I've got broad shoulders, so I can kind of hold it well. But you feel it, and I think obesity being like such a comorbidity and a cofactor for so many things, I really started to notice it in lots of different things. But I only started taking it seriously with my brain. And the way I noticed is I was sitting down to read, which is a practice that I never used to do much of at all. And I always used to wear it as a badge of honor. So I don't have time for reading and all this. And now I think of an unexamined life, and not reading is like one of the worst things you could possibly do for yourself. But I couldn't read in the same way that if you were to go into a gym for the first time and try and pick up 200 pounds, you can't, because you're feeble and you need to build that up. Same with reading. I could get a paragraph in, a page in, or maybe I'd read a chapter and I wouldn't have a clue what I just read. So these are little signs that you need to note in yourself, and then you need to fix them pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. Now, there could be different things that cause those symptoms to occur. It's really a symptom. You can't focus, you can't read before getting tired quite quickly, or just getting bored. That can be a sign of Erland syndrome. I actually had on Get
Tell me
Yourself
more.
Optimized Helen Erland, who is the person who discovered this syndrome. And yeah, it basically shows up as getting tired as you read. And she has these special color filters that you wear as part of your glasses, and that reduces the effect of Erland syndrome. So if the text kind of jumps around, or it seems a little jumbled, and it takes effort to read, and therefore you're going to get tired, just exhausted essentially while you're reading. That is a big indicator that it's likely to be Erland syndrome, and I think it's like 30% of people have it. It's really, really
Oh,
high. So yeah, that could be. I have it. I got tested by her and her team, and yeah, I have it, and so does my wife. And so we have special glasses that are like, I have them right here. These are Erland glasses. They have the Erland
oh
filters,
yeah.
and you have to get the right color for you. And she does this whole assessment to figure out what the right color is. Really cool. So, anyways, that could be part of the reason. Have you heard of Egoscue? Do you know about this?
No. This is great. So I'm glad I've got my pen at the ready. This is before this podcast, for people that are listening, I said, I'm just going to be, you asked me what can make it the best podcast I've ever been on. I was like, I think I'm just going to use this as to get one of the highest ticket consultants globally. I'm just going to use it very selfishly to download a bunch of information. So tell me about it as I selfishly take notes.
Okay, so Pete Egoscue is the guy who founded it, and I learned about it from Tony Robbins. He brings these Egoscue experts to come in and train people on, not just random people, but the people that are part of his Platinum Partnership, which I was for 3 years. It's a crazy expensive thing that you basically follow Tony around the world. Well, it's a little different now during the pandemic, but in normal times, he'd have 4 trips a year to exotic places like India and Cabo and Fiji and so forth. And I remember doing a skiing trip in Whistler that was also a content trip with the Tony Robbins Platinum Partners, and these Egoscue guys were training us before we would go out and hit the slopes, and they were showing us how to do things like an air bench. It's like you're trying to sit on an imaginary bench with your back against the wall so that you have something to push against. And it's a great exercise, but it's not necessary for everybody. They diagnose where you have weaknesses. Like you said, you had some hip issues. Well, they'll figure that out. They'll see where, for example, you're not symmetrical. Maybe one shoulder is higher up than the other, or one foot is pointed out more than the other, or one hip is higher up than the other. And they'll come up with a recipe of exercises from their whole regimen of Egoscue exercises, and that's what you'll do for 10 minutes a day, whatever the time period is. It's really cool. I think you'll really enjoy it. You should listen to my episode where I interviewed Pete Egoscue. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right up my street. So when it comes to physicality, one of the things that I've been using I'm a big believer in self-discovery when it comes to these problems and getting something actually to collect. So if you go to a doctor or physician with like a snapshot of information and your basic opinion, it's very hard for them to work out what's going on. But if you've got lots of data points over time, they can actually work with that, and it's much easier for them. So when lockdown happened, I was a big into weightlifting, and I was lifting very heavy on squats and things like that. And I went to this physio person. It's like, oh, it's your very weak glutes. I'm like, nonsense. I can do double my body weight in squats. She's like, And then she made me, the ballerinas on the bar and they flick their leg out. Have you seen that move?
Yeah.
She made me do that a couple of times, and I was trembling. And she's like, yeah, it's like I said, your glutes. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So I started doing all these different movements and exercises during lockdown, and started seeing all the places where, because you're just being haphazardly exercising as you think you should do, you're starting to create all these imbalances and all this shortening and longering of the muscles and tendons. And so the body is really good at hiding pain from you. So there's a guy, Kelly Starrett, runs Mobility WOD. He wrote a book called The Supple Leopard. Great name. Trains a bunch of the NFL teams, so he's a physician, and essentially he says if you can't depress any of your fascia across your body, so like take your arm, your leg, your neck, by at least half an inch and let it go without any pain, that's a serious problem. That is absolutely not how a human body is meant to be. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't have that. As I started, self just poke, and then you find things like in your legs and your calves and your back. So starting to do all sorts of different kind of weird and wonderful exercises that feel uncomfortable helps as a starting point, and then you realize it's all connected in quite a kind of Taoist kind of a way. So you work on fixing the whole instead of spot exercising. So that's been a big one.
Oh, very cool. Are you doing a lot of stretching, or how do you get supple like that? Like what kind of stretching are you doing?
So I got something, I can't remember what it's called, but it's essentially a piece of molded plastic for my spine, which is like a kind of ridged plastic thing which cups your spine. When I started using that, it was very painful. And another one which is like a kind of a half pipe type thing for my psoas. So for anyone out there who does a lot of sitting at a desk, your psoas is almost definitely the central point of problem for a lot of things, because it connects down through your hips and goes through your body. So it's very hard to hit, and it's very hard to stretch. So every night I'm maybe doing maybe an hour to an hour and a half, which sounds a lot, but I've substituted out what I'd usually do, which is screen time or Netflix or YouTube or just some sort of anything with a feed now. I massively avoid. The way I think of it is like, if you think of the way a horse eats with a feed bag and they just attach a bag to its face, that's kind of what it's like when I'm consuming this content. But instead I'll put a podcast on my headphones and I'll just go through the motions of a stretching routine. There's a guy on YouTube who addresses his followers as body weight warriors. It's a little cringe, but you get the picture. So he's a gymnast. So practicing gymnastics stretches and movements has been very, very telling. The most basic of poses, trembling, shaking like a leaf. And I think it's been interesting to see just how unfit you can be if you don't practice, and practice in a varied way.
Yeah. So you might want to check this out. It's a type of stretching called resistance flexibility. Mm-hmm. You need other people to help you with it, because you can't do this on your own. But they help you to provide resistance as you stretch. So you push, let's say your leg, let's say it's a leg stretch. You know how you'll be laying on your back, and then someone will hold your one leg up. Well, you're going to push against that person as much as you can, and then they're going to stretch you out. Stretch out your glute and hamstring and so forth, but you've provided resistance ahead of time, so you're going to end up stretching a lot more because you've done that. So there's an episode on, again, Get Yourself Optimized, where I interviewed Luther Cowden about this. It was really fascinating. So check that out, and you might want to find a practitioner in that.
Yeah, I love all that stuff. So that's been one of the biggest unlocks for me. I didn't realize. So looking at the posterior chain and where, like even things like blood flow that gets blocked through the posterior chain. So I was big into kettlebells for a long while, but I was just completely overdeveloping parts of my body, which caused pretty serious issues. What I'll typically do is I'll go for a hot bath, which again I'd put that into the thing that my grandmother would do of an evening, but get the candles going, get the incense going. So a hot bath, I would love to. I think the big plan for the next few years is to move to the coast, get somewhere that's got a garden on the beach. This is the English coast, so it's not warm. It's not a California kind of dream home, but I'd like to build a sauna. Because I respond very well to it, and I then go and stretch once I'm very overheated and very warm. And the kind of adult version of that is I used to smoke a tiny little bit of a herbal substance, which I won't mention the name of, but it's legal in the Netherlands and it's legal in California. And that also helped because it's a bit of a pain.
Oh, you're talking about chamomile.
Right, exactly. Caught me in one. But I find that the more things that change your state, the worse. So trying to get to just a baseline and just using what you've already got inside your brain and your body to do that's very important. We touched on coffee earlier. Caffeine's a real serious drug, and the way that the coffee compounds are put together and what it does to your body is no joke. And I know this sounds like ridiculous melodrama, but it's got such a powerful pull and it affects so many systems. I'm getting very interested in circadian rhythm and how that's affected. As I started to reduce coffee consumption, everything got better, from digestion to sleep to obviously things like irritability. And if you think about the timing of coffee consumption, it's typically first thing in the morning. You've already got high cortisol, for the gentleman out there, there's some physiological signs that you've got lots of chemicals blasting through your body, and it's usually you've created a tent pole in your bed sheets in the morning. So you don't need to add to that. You're already awake, and the thought of needing that is kind of ridiculous for a healthy human being. Should we be needing to stimulate ourselves with some sort of exogenous thing? I know it's only coffee, but really like minimizing that in a big way. And the type of macronutrients I take on in the morning, completely changing that profile as well. I was trying to do the kind of Dave Asprey view on things. So he's very like fat driven in his diet.
And very coffee driven.
Well, yeah, he's made a good...
He's a client of mine, actually. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, I did not know that. Well, he ranks very well, so congratulations. So that particular... I tried that for a little while, and I actually found that the explosive energy that I needed wasn't there, and the lethargy was really high. Even when I got past the kind of ketosis thing and the keto flu that people talk about, and taking plenty of like salt supplements and all of that, I just didn't feel great on it. And so I've added a sweet potato in the evenings, and that works wonders. And if I want anything like really sugary, so like a pre-workout, dates, but although it's very dangerous for me to have dates in the house because I don't typically eat anything sweet, so I can only buy those little mini packets, so that if I buy a big massive tray, I know the tray is going to be gone that evening.
That's funny. Binge eating dates. That's great. Now you practice intermittent fasting, right? So you have a 8-hour eating window or 6-hour? Like how long is that, and how often do you follow this?
It's about 6, and depending on how I feel, sometimes I'll just skip the entire day. I'm not particularly scientific with it. I kind of just go on how I'm feeling. Water and hydration are absolutely crucial to doing this properly. Most of the times when I feel hungry, I'm not hungry. I'm just very thirsty. And obviously, if you're adding coffee into your diet, then that's a diuretic, which obviously makes you want to drink more water. So typically around about
alcohol is a diuretic too, so that's another thing to watch out for. Yeah,
that's in Scotland. That's not true. It's not a diuretic in Scotland. It's a health elixir in Scotland.
Great.
Yeah. So typically it's 1 o'clock. 4 eggs scrambled, cooked in butter, and then I'll wait until maybe about 6 o'clock, and I'll typically have some sort of a beef with a baked broccoli or a salmon with a baked broccoli, and depending on what I'm going to be doing physicality wise, I'll add sweet potato or some dates. And I know that feels very plain and very Spartan. I take a bunch of greens powders and a bunch of supplements as well, so that's one of the things I should probably look at is the micronutrients intake and getting that up. But I am a very type A personality, so I'm very on or I'm very off, and I need a directive to live by. So little things like in my life, the way I think about things, I've started to keep a commonplace book. So any wisdom or knowledge or any values that I've kind of decided that I want to live by, everything gets written down. It's actually that little box there is my commonplace box, just with a bunch of punch cards in it. And it really just helps you in your decision making and kind of living your life. It sounds a little extreme perhaps, but it's helped me a lot, from silly things like I'm about to move tomorrow and I need to buy furniture. So in my head I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get a nice fancy Eames chair, and there is an £8,000 chair. That's a thoroughly ridiculous thing for someone to buy if you have and I'm very big into minimalism and stoicism as well. So I'm like, this does not align your values at all. Every pound, every dollar spent in my mind is a vote for your own slavery or your own freedom, and the idea of being attracted to spending on that sort of lustful type things. It's a very slippery slope, and you got to be very careful. I don't know how we got here, but
well, that reminds me that many years ago when I started my first business, I was in a group called Tech, the executive committee, and the chairman of it gave me a book called The Millionaire Next Door. And the key concept from that book is if you get the Rolex, or you get the fancy suit, or you get the fancy car, you feel compelled to complete the puzzle, because who's going to wear a Rolex and cheap clothes? Who's going to wear a really nice suit and drive a beat up junker of a car, right? And then it goes on and on. It just bleeds through your whole life. So the most successful, richest people in the world, many of them, they would never tell you. You would never know that they're millionaires, multimillionaires, etc., because they don't show it. Like Sam Walton, founder of Walmart, would drive an old pickup truck. I think decades old, because he just didn't care. Warren Buffett lives in the same home in Nebraska that he's lived in for decades, and it's not a mansion. I think that's laudable.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think if you're chasing after these ostentatious things, I think that's a sickness of your mind, and you need to seriously look at yourself in the mirror and just take a minute. Derek Sivers said something amazing on a podcast. I think it was Tim Ferriss asked him if you could put up a billboard anywhere in the world, what would it say? And he said, I would put up the slogan next to a big shopping mall, "It won't make you happy." And I absolutely love that as a concept. I've been reading Walden by Thoreau, and it's about a man living in a cabin in the woods, and about how little a human actually needs. A friend of mine sent me a quote over from, I can't remember the guy's name. It's one of the Stoics, and I'm going to completely hash it up and paraphrase it. But essentially, it goes along the lines of, what we have now is too much, but what we've had every single century before now has been just enough. And I really like to think about that and meditate on that.
Was it Marcus Aurelius?
It was someone like that. Yeah, it probably was Marcus Aurelius. So I find that fascinating, but it doesn't stop you being drawn to it. And that's the interesting thing. So I actually had a big dialogue with myself about my battery, my watch stopped. And I was like, I'm making some money now. I'm going to buy a Rolex Explorer. And then I kind of caught myself, and I'm like, all right. So I write to think. It helps with cognition. So I was like, why do you want this? And then I just couldn't get the right answer. And so I started playing on what that feeling was. But anyway, one of my core values, hilariously being a Scotsman, if anyone's ever seen Braveheart, is freedom. I'm not going to do the William Wallace freedom.
Come on, you got to do it.
Freedom.
I remember doing that at a Tony Robbins event. It was Date with Destiny, and all the men got up, and like first the scene played, and there were thousands of us in the room, and then all the men stood up, and we just screamed at the top of our lungs, "Freedom!" And the building shook, and all the women that were in the room just like swooned and were like mesmerized. And then Tony had some of the women talk about the experience of it, and like, wow, that was so powerful. Oh my God, I'm speechless, and da 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 da, like all this. And the idea is that when you're in your masculine as a man, and your partner, let's say that it's the opposite sex, and she is in her feminine, that polarity creates all this electricity. It's magical. So step into your full masculine if you're a masculine guy, and watch your woman swoon.
I think I don't know if you have an inner voice or an inner monologue playing at all, but a lot of the times your inner man trying to make him swoon at the things that you say you're going to do and you actually follow through with is just as important. You
can also dream about that stuff. You can have lucid dreams and do workouts or paint paintings or whatever in your sleep and make huge breakthroughs and actually improve your musculature just by dreaming about working out. Yeah, that's a
How
thing.
do you go about? Do you have a technique? Do you have a
Well,
framework?
you got to listen to my episode with Charlie Morley. He's one of the top lucid dreaming experts. He's actually in the UK, so maybe you could get coaching from him.
Charlie Morley. All right, that sounds excellent. Yeah, I realized
He's
very
so
quickly that
cool.
when
You'll
you're
love
at when
him.
it, yeah, I like all that sort of stuff because it does. There is an element of truth to it. I'm very interested in psychology. When it comes to making promises and setting goals, one of the things I used to do is set like an insane goal that was completely unachievable, just so that I would feel motivated to strive. But if you do that too much and you let yourself down or don't live up to your own expectations, like every single time you break a promise to someone who's not you, that's bad. But every time you break a promise to yourself, it's kind of like a gambling addiction in that no one can see physiological signs of a gambling addiction. It's all happening inside. And it's the same with that, and it's much less severe, but it's an insipid kind of chronic thing. Then you wake up one day and you're 60 and you're miserable and bent out of shape of the world, and that's why, because you've lied to yourself and painted a weird narrative around it.
Mm. Now, something you said a few minutes ago got me thinking when you're saying you write to think. And that
Yes.
reminded me of this technique I learned about 8 years ago called non-dominant handwriting. Have you heard of this?
No, is that when you don't dress in a latex catsuit to write? Is that what that is? Different type of.
That's a different thing. Yeah, we can
Oh,
talk about
okay.
that later. But the non-dominant handwriting technique is where you access your right brain, because the verbal center is in the left brain, and all of our kind of logic and linear thinking and so forth is happening over in the left. The L for left, very straight edge sort of thinking, whereas right brain, which commands the left side of the body. So many of us are right-handed. Are you right-handed?
I am.
Yeah.
My little
So
sister is both. We have video of her as a kid with coloring pens in both hands and coloring them in at the same time. But the school system knocked it out of her and forced her to do right-handed. I wonder what would happen if we let that flourish in terms of brain development.
yeah, interesting. Okay, so this idea of using your non-dominant hand, so it works for left-handed people too. They just would use the right hand. But the idea is, how do you access your right brain, your right hemisphere, and have it chime in on your problem-solving sessions or your to-do list or your kind of strategic planning and daily prioritizing and everything. So this is how you do it. You just kind of breathe with the intention of relaxing and calling on your right hemisphere. You close your eyes. You hold the pen in your left hand if you're right-handed, and you squeeze it. Kind of think about resetting things. Like you hit the reset button on your computer. And then open your eyes, start writing. Don't worry about it being messy or anything. That's not the point. And just have the intention of your right hemisphere chiming in on whatever it is. And if you hear your internal voice, that's your left hemisphere, because that's where the verbal centers are. So just quiet that down and just start writing and see what happens. We did this exercise. William Donius is the guy who taught this, and he had us come up with our totem animal. First, write it normally, right? So I had written down zebra. They're pretty cool. They're very distinctive, memorable. I think they're kind of badass. Well, then I switched to my right hemisphere and my left hand, did this exercise, and I ended up writing humpback whale, or maybe it was blue whale. It was a whale. It was one or the other. I'm like, wow, how different from a zebra is that? And then when I thought about it, like, no, actually, it resonates way more. I'm a humpback whale. I'm not a zebra. I mean, my ego likes to think of me as a zebra, but I'm a humpback whale. And I found that very powerful. Like I accessed something that I don't normally have immediate access to, and then I worked on that, and I've become more intentional and more thoughtful, aware. Like I'm aware of my awareness more than I had been in previous years, and I keep working on it. And just yeah, it's a really cool exercise. You should try it.
I like that a lot. You said, I'm aware that I'm aware. That's a huge part of starting to understand things and put it together. I've never been a big meditator or into mindfulness or anything like that, but that is one of the key things that I realized very early on, is being able to just view thoughts and feelings as they come round and stop labeling them. There's a lot of Marcus Aurelius stuff where he talks about that. It's like, well, stop with the labels. It just is. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. And trying to practice that and live it has been quite an interesting journey. As I was going through this, kind of like really ramping up with the reading in order to learn a little bit more, I got really frustrated with it because I wasn't putting any of it into practice whatsoever. And this kind of moment hit me, and I'm like, what's the point of all this? Am I doing it for, so I can so I can quote things and sound smart at dinner parties? Am I doing it because, I want to like fill out a bookshelf? Is like, what am I doing this for? Is this ego driven? And then I realized it was. I'm like, aha, right. So we need to start putting. So I'll constantly talk about maxims and frameworks and things like that. Like I'm really interested in creating your own set of first principles as things to live by. And although it sounds quite basic, you don't get taught that in school. You don't get taught that by parents. Well, if you're very lucky, you get taught that by parents, but it's highly unlikely. And I think it's very important to cultivate your brain as you kind of move through life. I think it's your kind of duty to build up as much wisdom as possible, then start putting it back out into the world.
So, what would be a good first principle for our listener who might have a child or children to teach that child?
Decide what you care about early and understand why. So I'm not a big fan of the Simon Sinek why. Ask yourself why 3 times. So if you're working in like the pin factory, it's very hard to get what's the purpose of working in the pin factory? It's like, well, there is no purpose. It's to make money to feed people. But there's some value there. So understand what you like and what you think is important in the world, and start to really softly exercise that, and don't think that exercising what you believe should be done as big, gratuitous, firework-laden events. It's a practice. It's like compound interest, that if you see opportunities to do it when it's easy, when it's hard, you're never, ever, ever going to do it. So just keep that in mind. How you think and how you act are very different things, and you don't connect the dots by one day, seeing something that creates moral outrage in you, then you make some big martyr level gesture to the world. That's not how that works. You do it in very small increments until one day you become it. So that's what I would say. I'm really into the 1.01 to the power of 365. I really like that as a concept. The idea of my first ever job, my manager sat me down and he drew a roller coaster. And he said, Ross, this is you. You're either all the way up or you're all the way down. You're either great or you're terrible. And he drew a line through it. And he's like, I need you to be that. And my ego at the time, I was like, well, if you don't put up with my, when I'm at my worst, you'll not get all my greatness, which is a classic thing for someone in their early 20s to say and think. Stop. I would also advise to stop thinking like that and instead think of it as gradual upticks. Look at the S&P 500 over the last 100 years. That should be, think of that as your trajectory, a smooth upward movement. It's not Bitcoin. You're not a big spiky up and down like build and crash individual. Life doesn't work like that. So just be very aware that it's going to take time, and you need to. It's practice.
Yeah, don't treat your life like you're a day trader.
Yes, that's a lovely, concise way of. That's going into the commonplace box. Fantastic. You've made it in.
Thank you. Amazing. Okay. Now, whatever happened with the chair situation? So you're moving tomorrow, and you're not getting the expensive chair, or are you?
No, no, God, no. Um, I'm not getting the expensive chair, and the reason being, and again, back to Marcus Aurelius, he liked to look at it as what it is. So he would look at, he'd wear these, I think it's Tyrian purple is the very expensive dye that used to be put in royalties' cloaks and things like that.
Right.
And he'd go to all these fancy banquets and all of that. And he's like, listen, this wine that I'm drinking is just old grapes. This food that I'm eating is just a dead animal. And this cloak that I'm wearing is animal hair dyed with fish blood. And when you start saying that to yourself, you look at things in a fundamentally different way. In Walden as well, I got to a chapter where he talks about the things that he owns, and he said he has 3 chairs. He has 1 for himself, 2 for company, and 3 for society. And I was like, what a beautiful, beautiful piece of writing. So I decided against the fancy Eames chair, because instead of putting that money into something which would create personal slavery in multiple ways, because like you were saying earlier, with you can't wear the Rolex with you start putting all the other pieces together. You can't wear the Rolex and not have the fancy car. You put yourself you label yourself and put your own self in a pigeonhole, which you need to live up to for yourself to keep your narrative going. It's a really dangerous place to be. So I put it in an investment instead. So I got the feeling of spending money and being lavish, but it went into something that will make me money further
Bitcoin.
down the line. So, not Bitcoin. I'm not a Bitcoin guy. I used to have a client who was I can't say who they are, but they were a FTSE 250 kind of stocks and shares trading company. Mm-hmm. And we got to see all their analytics. And spoiler alert, there's a reason why they're a FTSE 250 company. It's because no one wins. Day trading is gambling with a suit on. So just be careful with that sort of stuff. I'm sure there's smart ways to do it, but unless you're wanting to invest your life in it and you've got high risk tolerance, probably stay away from it.
Yeah.
So I ended up not getting the chair.
So how are you going to look after your health while you're sitting? Because I'm sure you must sit a lot being at the computer, unless you're doing a standing chair or a standing desk thing.
Well, I've got the absolute joy.
Oh, yes, you do have a standing desk that's adjustable. Isn't that fancy?
Yeah.
I have one too, but it's not here. It's back in LA in storage right now. So, yeah, I have to sit a lot in this chair, and it's not a fancy chair. But I do have this little biohack. I think it costs like $1. It's a
best one.
Yeah, it's a little cylinder of styrofoam. I think it's 4 inches in diameter, and you just put it behind your lower back, and that's amazing. You do that for maybe 5, 10, whatever minutes. Take it out when you feel like you've had enough of it, and then just put it back in every so often and do it throughout the day. It really helps.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The foam rolling is as well. I have a lacrosse ball which I literally just jam into my glutes. So if my neighbors can hear through my walls, they must think I'm up to all sorts of crazy stuff, because I'm not silent when I'm doing those stretches. If I hit a sore spot, I exclaim it to the world. On the chair thing, I decided to go to, there's a secondhand furniture store. It's like a warehouse near where I live, and I went in there and I got something for I think it was like £70, so like $100, which is not junk by the side of the road, but it's certainly not fancy designer stuff, and I really want to cultivate that a lot more. I actually sold a lot of the things that I own. I started doing things like taking plugs out of things and putting them in drawers. So the item was still there. So the television was still there, the screen was still there, the laptop, the iPad, whatever it was still there. But in order to, if I wanted it, I really had to want it. And then you find, actually, I don't want any of this, but it's there. And Thoreau would say there's a sentence he's got where he's like, he's seen a bit of limestone that was on his desk as a paperweight, and he's like, it's just another thing to dust around. So he, like, as he thought that, he picked it up and he threw it out the window. So yeah, so I think I've done okay there. I think I've lived up to my values, but God, it was exhausting getting to that point. I think most normal humans would just think, I shouldn't be ostentatious and just move on. But having that value system helps make those decisions.
Yeah. Well, it's removing the trigger or the prompt, because a habit has three components. It has the prompt, then the habit, and then the reward. So let's say that you have this habit of watching Netflix, binging on Netflix. You have your remote by the sofa. Every time you go sit on the sofa, you reach for the remote, you turn on the TV, and you start watching Netflix. So that's the prompt. Sit on the couch, grab the remote. Then you get the reward, the dopamine fix. So what you do is you take the remote, you put it in the bedroom in a drawer, or maybe even in the trunk of the car, or the boot of the car. I got to translate for you.
Anglophiles rejoice.
Yeah. And then you have to go get it if you really want to watch Netflix. So you've removed the prompt and maybe put a different thing there instead. So instead of a remote control, maybe a book that you're really enjoying, Marcus Aurelius or something, right? So that is how you kind of scramble and rewrite these patterns, these well-worn habits in your brain. Yeah.
So
or one way.
One of the habits I was very scared about was the feeling of wanting to touch a phone. So I told you at the start, I lock it in at my desk drawer. I typically don't touch it for as long as humanly possible. And the nervous twitches, try it. If you're someone listening to this who uses their phone quite a lot, just put it in a drawer. See how you feel. I guarantee you'll feel uneasy and anxious, and if something's missing. No one needs to talk to you right now. People rarely need to talk to you about anything. It's just self-soothing, and that's a real problem if you're using this thing to kind of anesthetize yourself and self-soothe. That's dangerous, because then I think it changes the shape and formation of our brain and how we consume information. I really think it's a modern day smoking.
I agree with you. Yeah. I've severely limited my my phone usage. I deleted Facebook from my phone. I set and on my iPhone, on the iOS, you can set a limit for how much time on certain apps and certain websites. So I could still go to facebook.com on the Safari browser, but it would be the time limit in 5 minutes. So 5 minutes per day. People don't thrive by spending lots of time on Facebook. It actually is a depressant. It's not healthy, and studies have shown this. And did you see the Social Dilemma movie on Netflix?
Yeah, and I was riveted by it, and I felt every second of it. So yeah, I think that's a serious problem we're going to find out in the next 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
As a little hint for anyone out there, I highly recommend a factory reset on your phone, and just make it completely black, so absolutely nothing on there. So when you do pick up and look at it, it's not interesting, and that's a huge pattern interrupt, actually changing where your apps are or deleting them all. So I stupidly factory resetted it, and all my pictures and all that went away. But now there's no reason to touch this unless I need to physically phone someone or two-factor authenticate into a website. So that helps.
Yep. Well, here's another trick: is triple click. So I have a lot of categories on my phone, but I triple click to go to grayscale mode. See? Now I'm in grayscale.
Oh,
And you
like that.
stay
I'm
in
just not
grayscale
interested.
mode, and it's just, yeah, it's not very entertaining or anything, and you're going to use it less. But it's only a triple click away to get full color back, so that if you need to, I don't know, edit an image for uploading to Instagram, you can still do that. Yeah.
Excellent. That's a good hack. That's another good one.
Yep. Yep. I learned that from Tristan Harris, the guy who founded the Center for Humane Technology. I used to work at Google or Facebook, I forget which, and he was part of the evil empire that tried to get us hooked on the technology, and then he saw the error in his employer's ways and quit and started a nonprofit. Anyway, so I know we're about out of time, and we didn't even really talk about much about building a business, but it's all related though, because if you don't have a strong foundation for your health and your vitality and energy, you don't protect your energy. How viable and sustainable is a business that you build?
Yeah, I mean, it's directly correlated, your health and your energy, and just making sure that you really guard that. One of the first things to do is guard your time. So, for anyone out there who's feeling overwhelmed or a bit stressed, go to your calendar for next week and just put out of office on between 8 a.m. and 12 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. Got your phone, kill all notifications between 8 and 12, and just do that. And for the first week, people get annoyed because you're not answering them or emailing them or something like that. But then you'll train them not to expect you to talk to them. We instituted something at Type A Media called library hours, where there's no comms and chatter or anything like that. It's good, deep work. And then in the afternoon, after you've had lunch and you're feeling sleepy, talk to as many people as you like. We schedule things for 6 hours a day, not for 8. Because I think if I can get 3 good hours out of someone in the morning and 3 good hours in the afternoon, that is pretty optimal. And I think any employer doing planning or trying to get more out of their team, the secret is not to add more, it's to take it away. So that's why we do 4-day work weeks and we do 6-hour days. And a lot of people, especially American listeners who are perhaps workaholics or have got a culture of hardcore work, be super careful with that, because although you're sitting at the desk, it doesn't actually mean you're doing anything.
Yeah. You can get more done if you're in a flow state in one day than you would in an entire week, just in your regular beta brainwave patterns. Yep, for sure. Do you want to do like a minute or two of kind of a lightning round? You game for that?
Sure, that'd be fun.
Okay, so
Yeah, I love that stuff.
I'll give you a topic, and you just give me a quick answer. I'll give you my quick answer as well, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Ready? All right.
Okay.
Here we go. Your favorite supplement?
Vitamin D.
Well, that's a good one. That's.
Do you want an explanation, or do you just want? Is that too quick?
No, that's not. That's fine. We gotta move fast if we're gonna do a lightning round. So vitamin D, which is a great protectant,
Go for it.
and it's very helpful for COVID resilience. So that's great. Mine is Epicor, which really helps me not get sick. Really, really good. So those are great. Okay, moving on to what's your favorite metric to track? Like body health, biohacking type metric to track.
It's not a metric. When I look back at my writing, if I see themes popping up, so I just look for themes. I don't typically look at hard metrics. I tracked weight for a little while. I done that daily. That was a mistake because muscle and fat weigh different amounts. But what I like to do is I like to track time. Actually, I'm actually addicted to time. So time boxing, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 15 minutes, etc. So that's what I track is time.
Okay. HRV for me, heart rate variability.
Oh yeah, I love it. Okay.
Next, what's your favorite quantified self measurement? This is similar, but I'm not going to let you get away with vague answers. I want an actual metric What's your favorite thing that you track, quantified self perspective, and with what device?
Box stretch centimeters with a ruler. And what I mean by that is when you sit down and you attempt to touch past your toes, that's quite a good indicator of overall flexibility if you're able to add centimeters to that. So anything that would connect us to ancestry when it comes to physicality.
Okay, great. And for me, I use the Oura Ring, so OURA, and I'll track HRV as I said, but I'll also track my sleep score. And deep sleep and REM sleep in particular, I'll look at in terms of the number of hours or minutes that I got, but then the overall sleep score. All right, cool. All right, last one. Favorite book, nonfiction.
Oh, that's so hard. Favorite book nonfiction would be, because I'm reading at the moment, would be Marcus Aurelius. That's just the recency bias. Marcus Aurelius Meditations. I'm going to cheat and throw in Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay Self-Reliance. It's not a book, but that's a great one.
Okay. So for me, I've got a lot of favorites, but I'll use Freakonomics. Yeah, that's a fun one. Favorite fiction book, and this is where we'll stop.
Favorite fiction book, In Search of Lost Time.
Okay. For me, it's The Diamond Age, a young lady's illustrated primer, which is a science fiction book about the coming age of nanotechnology. It's in the near future, the next 20, 30 years, and it's by Neil Stephenson, who also wrote Snow Crash and some other amazing sci-fi books. Yeah, it will get you thinking about what's coming down the pike with not just AI, but also molecular nanotechnology, and how incredibly different of a world we're going to be living in just 10 or 20 years. Like, it's going to be more like a Star Trek show than it's going to be like our regular existence currently. Pretty cool.
I can't wait.
All right. Well, this was fun. This was unexpected. So how do we end this? Let's leave our listener with a resource that they can consume on your site, or somehow that you can offer them. And I have a feeling I know what it's going to be. Something with 2 C's in it. And then also, what is your agency's website if they wanted to work with you?
I'm going to throw you a curveball and say don't look up any of my stuff, because there's considerably better things out there to be spending your time on.
Oh, come on.
As a website. I know, I will plug it. But thou shalt not commit logicalfallacy.com. Great place to start if you're into the scientific and the Socratic method. Like, have a look at that. I have a weekly web show called The Canonical Chronicle, which we call the meme-infused SEO news, where we try and deliver you little updates and keep you laughing. That's available at canonicalchronicle.com.
Awesome. And then the Type A agency website? Yeah,
typeamedia.net. I like to tell people just Google us, because if we don't show up, then we're clearly not very good at SEO. So Google Type Media and see what happens.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ross. This was a lot of fun and very enlightening. I'm sure that our listener has some inspiring tips for improving their health, their longevity, their happiness, their awareness, and their business. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.